Hello. We're going to continue with the Tiger Rising. Last time we read about Rob and Sistine, and they were out at lunch, or Rob was out at lunch eating by himself, and the Threemonger bully brothers that were on the bus with him earlier, they were bothering Sistine, and he wanted to yell at her and tell her, hey run, but he kept his mouth closed because that's what he feels like is best for him to do. And anyways, his mouth ended up opening and getting the best of him, and he walked over there and said, leave her alone or else. And the boys are, oh, or else what are you gonna do? Well, he ended up running. He just ran. Well, they ended up running and chasing him, and so essentially him running away from them ended up saving her from being bullied at that time. So she was appreciative of that. So that's kind of where we ended up. So we are going to start on chapter 8 today. All right, chapter 8. His father read the note from the principal slowly, putting his big finger under the words as if they were bugs he was trying to keep still. When he was finally done, he laid the letter on the table and rubbed his eyes with his fingers and sighed. The rain beat a sad rhythm on the roof of the motel. That stuff ain't nothing anybody else can catch, his father said. I know it, Rob told him. I already told that to that principal once before. I called up there and I told him that. Yes, sir, said Rob. His father sighed. He stopped rubbing his eyes and looked up at Rob. You want to stay home, he asked. Rob nodded. His father sighed again. Maybe I'll make an appointment, get one of them doctors to write down that what you got ain't catching, all right? Yes, sir, said Rob. But I won't do it for a few days. I'll give you some time off. Well, that'd be all right, said Rob. You got to fight them, them boys. I know you don't want to, but you got to fight them, else they won't ever leave you alone. Rob nodded. He saw Sistine twirling and punching and kicking, and that vision made him smile. In the meantime, you can help me out around here, his father said. Do some of the maintenance, man work at the motel. Do some sweeping and cleaning up for me. The Beauchamp's running me ragged. There ain't enough hours in the day to do everything that man wants done. Now go on and hand me that medicine. His father slathered and slapped the fishy-smelling ointment on Rob's legs, and Rob concentrated on holding still. You still think Beauchamp is the richest man in the world? He asked his father. Nah, his father said. He don't own but this one itty-bitty motel now, and the woods. He just likes to pretend he's rich is all. Why? I was just wondering, said Rob. He was thinking about the tiger pacing back and forth in the cage. He was certain that the tiger belonged to Beauchamp, and wouldn't you have to be the richest man in the world to own a tiger? Rob wanted desperately to go see the tiger in, but he was afraid that he had imagined the whole thing. He was afraid that the tiger might have disappeared into the morning mist. Can I go outside, Rob asked when his father was done. No, his father said. I don't want that medicine rained off you. It costs too much. Rob was relieved almost that he had to stay inside. What if he went looking for the tiger when he wasn't there? Rob's father cooked them macaroni and cheese for supper on the 2-burner hot plate they kept on the table next to the TV. He boiled the macaroni too long, and a lot of it stuck to the pan, so there weren't very many noodles to go with the powdery cheese. Someday, he told Rob, you and me will have a house with a real stove, and I'll do some good cooking then. This is good, Rob lied. You eat all you want. I ain't hungry, his father told him. After supper, his father fell asleep in the recliner. With his head thrown back and his mouth open, he snored, and his feet, big with crooked toes, jerked and trembled. In between the snores, his stomach growled long and loud as if he was the hungriest man in the world. Rob sat on the bed and started to work on carving the tiger. He had a good piece of maple, and his knife was sharp, and in his mind he could see the tiger clearly. Something different came out of the wood. It wasn't a tiger at all. It was a person with a sharp nose and small eyes and skinny legs. It wasn't until he started working on the dress that Rob realized he was carving Sistine. He stopped for a minute and held the wood out in front of him and shook his head in wonder. It was just like his mother always said. You could never tell what would come out of the wood. It did what it wanted, and you just followed. He stayed up late working on the carving, and when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed about the tiger, only it wasn't in a cage. It was free and running through the woods, and there was something on its back, but Rob couldn't tell what it was. As the tiger got closer and closer, Rob saw that the thing was Sistine in her pretty party dress. She was riding the tiger. In his dream, Rob waved to her and she waved back at him. But she didn't stop. She and the tiger kept going, past Rob, deeper and deeper into the woods. All right, chapter 9. His father woke him up at 5:30 the next morning. "Come on, son," he said, shaking Rob's shoulder. "Come on, you're a working man now. You got to get up." He took his hand away and stood over Rob for a minute more, and then he left. Rob heard the door to the motel room squeak open. He opened his eyes. The world was dark. The only light came from the falling Kentucky star. Rob turned over in bed and pulled back the curtain and looked out the window at the sign. It was like having his own personal shooting star, but he didn't ever make a wish on it. He was afraid that if he started wishing, he might not be able to stop. In his suitcase of not thoughts, there were also not wishes. He kept the lid closed on them too. Rob leaned on his elbow and stared at the star and listened to the rain gently drumming its fingers on the roof. There was a warm, glowing kind of feeling in his stomach, a feeling that he wasn't used to. It took him a minute to name it. The tiger. The tiger was out there. He got out of bed and put on shorts and a t-shirt. "Still hot," his father said when Rob stepped out the door. "And still raining." "Uh-huh," said Rob, rubbing his eyes. "Yes, sir. If it don't stop soon, the whole state ain't going to be nothing but one big swamp." "The rain don't bother me," Rob muttered. On the day of his mother's funeral, it had been so sunshiny that it hurt his eyes. And after the funeral, he and his father had to stand outside in the hot, bright light and shake everybody's hand. Some of the ladies hugged Rob, pulling them to them in jerky, desperate movements, smashing his head onto their chests. "If you don't look just like her," they told him, rocking him back and forth and holding on to him tight. Or they would say, "You got your mama's hair, that cobwebby blonde." And they ran their fingers through his hair and patted his head like he was a dog. And every time Rob's father extended his hand to somebody else, Rob saw the rippled place in his suit where it had split open when he slapped Rob to make him stop crying. And it reminded Rob again, do not cry, do not cry. That was what the sun made him think of, the funeral. And so he didn't care if he ever saw the sun again. He didn't care if the whole state did turn into a swamp. His father stood up and went back into the motel room and got himself a cup of coffee and brought it back outside. The steam rose off of it and curled into the air. "Now that I'm a working man," Rob said shyly, "could I drink some coffee?" His father smiled at him. "Well," he said, "I guess that'd be all right." Rob went inside and poured himself a mug of coffee and brought it back outside and sat down next to his father and sipped it slowly. It tasted hot and dark and bitter. He liked it. "All right," his father said after about 10 minutes. "It's time to get to work." He stood up. It wasn't even 6 o'clock. As they walked together alongside the back of the motel to the maintenance shed, his father started to whistle "Minin' for Gold." It was a sad song he used to sing with Rob's mother. Her high, sweet voice had gone swooping over his father's deep one, like a small bird flying over the solid world. His father must have remembered too, because he stopped halfway through the song and shook his head and cursed softly under his breath. Rob let his father walk ahead of him. He slowed down and stared into the woods, wanting to see some small part of the tiger, a flick of his tail or the glow from his eyes, but there was nothing to see except for rain and darkness. "Come on, son," his father said, his voice hard, and Rob hurried to catch up. All right, we're going to stop there. We'll read some more tomorrow. Bye, guys.